Dust hung heavy in the late afternoon sky, curling in lazy spirals over the endless stretch of prairie. Cole rode slowly, his boots resting in the stirrups, the leather of his saddle groaning softly beneath him. He had been riding all morning, the sun beating down on the brim of his worn hat, the wind whipping dust across his face. To an outsider, the trail might have seemed desolate, abandoned even, but Cole knew the prairie like the back of his hand. He could read the land the way some read books. Every ridge, every gully, every crooked fence told a story if you took the time to notice. And for years, he had taken the time, because solitude was his only companion, and the land was the only friend he trusted. He had been following a faint trail of hoofprints, thinking they might lead him to the nearest town, when a curl of smoke caught his eye. It rose like a lazy finger into the sky, thin and wavering, almost swallowed by the horizon. Curiosity pricked at him. He hadn't seen a house in days, and the trail of smoke suggested someone was alive, someone struggling perhaps. Cole wasn't the kind to ignore the call for help. Not because he liked people. He didn't, but because he knew the harsh truth of the prairie. It could kill a man, a woman, or a child if they were unprepared. As he approached, the source of the smoke became clearer. A small cabin, weather-beaten and leaning slightly to one side, sat precariously among the rolling hills. Outside, a boy no older than 10 wrestled with a horse that was visibly frightened, its hooves kicking up dust and dirt. Beside him, an elderly woman struggled to carry a basket that seemed far too heavy for her frail frame. Their movements were clumsy, desperate, but determined. Cole slowed his horse to a trot, watching them silently from a distance. The boy glanced up, his eyes wide, scanning the horizon for danger. Cole could see the fear in him, but also a spark of stubbornness, the kind that refused to back down even when the odds were stacked. The woman, Mabel, dropped the basket with a soft thud and wiped sweat from her brow, her thin shoulders hunched under the weight of years and toil. Cole felt something stir inside him, a protective instinct he hadn't acknowledged in years. He dismounted slowly, letting the reins of his horse slacken. His boots sank slightly into the soft, dusty earth, and the horse let out a low whinny, sensing his owner's caution. Cole approached them carefully, hands relaxed but ready. "Need some help," he called out, his voice low but steady. The boy froze and the woman turned sharply. Their eyes were wary, scanning him for threat or trickery. Cole noticed the boy's lip quiver slightly, the way he gripped the rope tighter, and something in Cole's chest softened. He had seen fear before, fear of the land, fear of men, but there was also a hunger in that boy's eyes, a desire to survive that mirrored his own. "It's okay," Cole said, taking a step closer. "I'm not gonna hurt you. Just thought maybe you could use a hand." Mabel straightened slightly, her face etched with lines of exhaustion and caution. She nodded, though her eyes still held suspicion. We'll manage," she said softly, her voice trembling. "Thank you, sir." Cole didn't argue. Instead, he offered a hand to the boy, whose small fingers barely reached around his. Together, they calmed the frightened horse, coaxing it with soft words and careful movements. Cole could feel the tension in the air ease slightly, though he remained alert, the habit of a lifetime keeping him vigilant. Once the horse was quiet, Cole led them to his cabin, a modest structure with a single chimney and a wooden porch that creaked under weight. It was nothing grand, but it was warm, and Cole prided himself on keeping a fire going, especially for travelers who might need shelter. He didn't ask names at first, didn't ask where they were from or why they were here. That came later. For now, he simply offered them refuge from the cold, the wind, and the loneliness that stretched across the prairie like a shadow. Inside, the cabin smelled faintly of wood smoke and horse blankets, a scent Cole had long associated with safety and home. He stoked the fire, watching the flames lick the walls as the boy and the woman settled near the hearth. The boy, Sammy, stared wide-eyed at the dancing shadows, while Mabel's hands trembled slightly as she adjusted her shawl. Cole handed them blankets and a bit of bread he had kept for such occasions. They ate in silence at first, the crackle of the fire filling the gaps between them. Cole watched them from his chair across the room, feeling a strange mixture of curiosity and caution. These weren't the usual travelers, he realized. There was something about their posture, their mannerisms, the quiet dignity in Mabel's eyes that spoke of a life far beyond the dusty trail. Yet here they were, asking nothing of him but shelter, and that was enough. The night had settled into a quiet rhythm, broken only by the occasional pop of the fire and the soft scratching of the wind against the cabin walls. Cole sat near the hearth, watching Sammy and Mabel as they slowly began to relax, their initial wariness fading into the warm glow of the flames. The boy fidgeted with his fingers, his eyes reflecting curiosity as he studied the simple furnishings of the cabin: well-worn chairs, a wooden table scarred with years of use, and shelves holding jars of preserves and a few leather-bound books. Despite the rough surroundings, there was a sense of life here, one that spoke of survival, care, and quiet resilience. Mabel spoke first, her voice gentle but firm, as if she were testing the boundaries of safety. "You've got a strong hand with that horse," she said, glancing at Cole. "And patience, too. Not many men on these plains would bother with a frightened animal like that." Cole gave a faint smile, the kind that touched the corners of his eyes without breaking his stoic expression. "Patience is the only way to survive out here," he replied. "The land teaches it, folks, not always." Sammy's eyes lit up. "Can you teach me to rope cattle?" he asked, his voice tinged with excitement and a hint of pleading. Cole chuckled softly, a deep, gravelly sound that filled the room. "Sure, little man, but first, you gotta learn to respect the rope. It's not a toy, it's a tool, like everything else out here. You treat it right, it'll save you. You treat it wrong, well, it might just bite back." The boy nodded eagerly, absorbing every word like it was gospel. Over the next few days, the cabin became a hub of quiet activity. Cole found himself teaching Sammy the basics of ranch work: how to mend fences without getting a rope burn, how to coax cattle without startling them, and how to read the land for signs of trouble. The boy's laughter rang out across the plains, bright and clear, chasing away the usual solitude that hung over Cole like a shadow. Mabel, for her part, tended to the garden outside, sharing tips with Cole on growing vegetables even in the thin prairie soil, while quietly observing how the cabin became something more than just a shelter. There were nights when they sat around the fire, telling stories to pass the time. Mabel spoke of lands far beyond the prairie, of cities with towering buildings and bustling streets, places that seemed almost unimaginable to Cole. She spoke with a humility that belied experience, never boasting of wealth or privilege, instead focusing on lessons learned, the people she had known, and the importance of kindness. Sammy, enthralled, listened to every word, occasionally asking questions that revealed a keen mind and a sharp wit. Cole, in turn, shared fragments of his own life, stories he rarely told anyone. Tales of long rides across the plains, encounters with outlaws, and the quiet moments of reflection that only solitude can bring. He found himself laughing more than he had in years, the sound strange but welcome in the enclosed space of the cabin. There was a rhythm to their days, a balance between work and conversation, silence and laughter. And through it all, Cole began to realize that something was changing in him. He noticed how Sammy's curiosity brought out patience he didn't know he still had, how Mabel's gentle guidance reminded him of the value of nurturing rather than simply surviving. It was a subtle shift at first, a softer word here, a small gesture there, but gradually, it became impossible to ignore. The boy's excitement at mastering a new skill, the grandmother's quiet pride in tending the garden, the way they laughed together over a spilled bucket of water, all of it began to chip away at the walls Cole had built around himself. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of amber and crimson, Cole found himself standing outside, watching Sammy chase a rabbit across the meadow while Mabel tended to the firewood. The sight struck him with an unexpected intensity. He had spent years wandering alone, content with the vast emptiness of the prairie. But now, seeing the boy's unrestrained joy and the grandmother's serene focus, he realized that life could be richer, fuller, and warmer when shared. Yet, even as he felt this burgeoning connection, Cole remained unaware of the extraordinary reality of his guests. The boy and his grandmother were not merely travelers seeking refuge, they were the hidden backbone of the territory, a family whose wealth and influence stretched far beyond the dusty plains and modest cabin. Their stories, their humility, and their quiet resilience masked a life of unimaginable privilege, one that had been carefully concealed beneath the guise of hardship and wandering. The morning sun burned through a thin layer of mist, casting golden streaks across the prairie. Cole had risen early, as was his habit, the creak of his boots on the cabin floor breaking the gentle hush of dawn. He had come to cherish these quiet hours, the moment before the world fully awoke, when the land seemed to breathe with him. Today, though, something felt different. There was an undercurrent in the air, a strange energy he couldn't quite place. He stepped outside, the cold wind biting at his face, and noticed the distant rumble of wheels on gravel. At first, he thought it was a band of traders or perhaps a group of ranchers moving cattle, but as the sound grew louder, he realized these were no ordinary travelers. Gleaming carriages, polished and imposing, rolled toward his cabin, each pulled by well-groomed horses and followed by attendants in crisp, dark uniforms. Cole's hand instinctively went to his hat, gripping it as a knot of suspicion formed in his chest. The carriages stopped near the cabin, and men in tailored coats stepped down, their movements precise and formal, as if rehearsed for a stage. Cole's horse shifted nervously beside him, sensing the tension in the air. He watched silently, assessing whether this was a threat, a trap, or simply the arrival of strangers with important business. Then Mabel appeared on the porch, calm as the dawn itself, a faint smile playing on her lips. She raised a hand to the approaching men, and they halted. "Cole," she called softly, her voice carrying a gentle authority that seemed to command respect even from these strangers, "please, just watch." The leader of the men stepped forward, bowing slightly. "Mrs. Whitmore," he said, his tone deferential. "We've been searching for you and the boy. Your family, your holdings, it is time to return. All has been arranged." Cole blinked, confusion tightening his features. "Holdings, family?" he asked, his voice rough from years of disuse in conversation. Mabel stepped closer, resting a hand lightly on Sammy's shoulder. "Cole," she said, "we never asked for much from the world. We've always lived quietly, humbly, to avoid attention. But now, it is time to reclaim what is ours. And we couldn't leave without thanking the man who offered shelter when no one else would." The words struck Cole like a thunderclap. He had thought of them as ordinary travelers, vulnerable and in need of safety. And yet here they were, standing at the edge of his property, surrounded by wealth he could scarcely imagine. The thought made his chest tighten, not with envy, but with disbelief. For years, he had wandered the plains alone, assuming solitude was his fate. And yet, fate had led these extraordinary people to his doorstep, not out of obligation, but because he had simply offered kindness without question. Sammy, oblivious to the formalities and protocols, ran toward Cole, his small feet kicking up dust. "Cowboy," he shouted, laughing, "look at all those horses. And the carriages, are those really ours?" Cole ruffled the boy's hair, trying to mask his own astonishment. "Looks like it," he said, his voice a mix of wonder and disbelief. Mabel stepped forward, placing a hand gently on Cole's arm. "You've given us more than shelter," she said quietly, her eyes meeting his. "You've given us trust, protection, and a reminder that kindness still exists in this world. No gold, no estate, no wealth could ever repay that. But we hope you understand that everything we are and everything we have is now part of a larger world, and you, Cole, are part of it too." Cole felt the weight of her words settle over him, a strange warmth spreading through his chest. He had lived a life built on distance, on watching the world from the edges, convinced that connection was dangerous, fleeting. But here, in the glow of the morning sun and surrounded by the hidden grandeur of the Whitmore family, he understood that solitude was no longer his only companion. He could choose to ride alone, or he could ride alongside those who had come to mean something more than just strangers passing through. As the convoy of carriages moved closer, the enormity of the situation sank in. The estate in the distance, vast and imposing, shimmered in the morning light, its windows reflecting the sun like countless tiny mirrors. Cole's gaze shifted to Sammy, who was bounding toward the cabins, his laughter ringing across the plains, unrestrained and pure. He looked at Mabel, serene and poised, yet radiant with gratitude and unspoken power. And then he looked back at the path he had ridden alone for years, the endless plains stretching beyond the horizon. For the first time in decades, Cole felt the stirrings of belonging, a connection that could not be measured by distance or isolation. He realized that the kindness he had offered, the simple act of opening his door to strangers, had bridged a world he never expected to enter. The lonely cowboy, once content with the endless prairie and his own shadow, now found himself at the heart of a story larger than he could have imagined, a story where courage, trust, and empathy were the truest forms of wealth.